So this program that we're going to discuss today has its roots in both Deming and Womack. So by the time we're done today, one of the things I want to make sure you understand is we're not just talking about a lean program, we're talking about a lean culture. It's a lean safety culture, and having the right culture with your organization makes employees not just safer, but also healthier, more productive. It really is looking at lean as more of a way of life, not just a safety program that we have on the job site. I'll introduce a couple of tools, 5Y, and how we can use 5Y to really get down to the true root cause of an accident. Many times in our root cause, we stop at a behavior, but I'm going to challenge you today to be thinking that the root cause can go much further than just an employee behavior. One of the ways that we look at this and to discover that root cause is understand the difference between where we're at and where we want to be. And this is the lean gap. So this gap analysis, we're going to look at the gap analysis and how do we approach what we can perceive as a safety problem and really try to get to the right safety result. And then lastly, part of this culture and part of this 5Y piece is to introduce fact finding and not just fault finding. Fault finding usually is based more on behavior. And we're looking at how do we find the facts and what's the difference between fact finding and fault finding so that we can really get to the root cause of the accident and prevent them in the future. So I want you to think about your own safety program, the company that you're at, the program that you have. How would you describe your culture? How do your employees look at your program and how do they respond? Is it one where we all say safety first, but when it comes to the work, do we put production first? Where does quality fit into all of this as well? Do you have a safety slogan? And what does that safety slogan mean? What does it mean to you? And how effective do you believe your safety program is? When you look at the number of accidents, certainly, right, we want to make sure that everybody stays safe, but the key is it really effective? Is it effective on the job site, or is it effective at changing people's attitudes towards safety? So one of the things I pick on a lot is safety slogans. Now, there's nothing wrong with safety slogans, but if you go back all the way to Deming, he says that get rid of slogans. He said that they're just mostly it's just marketing. We're trying to rebrand ourselves. And what does that slogan? What does that safety slogan actually mean? And if you've thought through it, what is the desired result of having this slogan? I will tell you that out of all the slogans I've come across, the one that has impressed me the most was safety is a way of life. And think about that. Safety is a way of life. It's not just something that you do when you show up to work. It's something that we practice every day. And if you think about, worker accidents and think about just accidents in general, well, most accidents happen at home. Most times we are taking unnecessary risks at home that result in an accident. And our mentality of our workers sometimes bring that, I did it at home, I'm going to bring that attitude to work. Well, at work, we set up all these new policies that you need to follow, but are they truly following those policies? So this is one of my favorite pictures, right? Safety is my goal. And we've got two guys sitting in the back of a pickup truck, which is, obviously a safety violation. Now, if we look at the word safety, what does it mean? Well, it's a feeling. It's a freedom from occurrence of risk, injury, danger, or loss. So what we're thinking about is safety is this freedom. And the question I have is, can safety in and of itself be a goal? See, you want to create an environment where nobody is safe. That's where I would feel that freedom. So to me, safety in and of itself is not the goal. Safety is the culture or the environment in which you want to create. You want to have this environment where everybody feels safe. Now, no accidents can be a goal, and a low EMR or a better safety record can be a goal. But many times goals don't always give us the right results. when people see a goal, they'll use whatever means and methods to get to that goal. And what I've seen through my career is where you provide a safety incentive, maybe a tool or some monetary incentive for being safe. The result of that is when people get hurt, they don't report it because they don't want to give up their goal or give up their reward. It may also be with teams. You set a certain goal for a team. Well, then they'll cover things up in order to get the reward. The point being is that if you're going to have a goal, that goal has to get you the desired result and get you the right behavior. Safety in and of itself, if we say safety is my goal or safety is number one, well, what does that really mean? And we use these terms all the time, but we haven't really defined what it means. So what I want to talk about today is to get us to think about what really should we be doing as far as safety. Because here's the key component for us as leaders. We have compliance programs. We have safety rules and regulations, right? There's certain things you have to do when you come on the job site. And so do our employees feel like, that they're restricted? These are all the rules I have to live by. But what we really want is for our employees to want to be safe. So how do we go from compliance to desire? We want our people to desire to be safe. We want them to be safe. We want to create the atmosphere of the environment where they feel safe. So the challenge, I think, starts with your beliefs. What do you believe? Do you believe that your employees show up every day to work safely, be productive, and produce a quality product? Now, unfortunately, I'm online today. I can't ask this question, but when I have an audience, I always ask them to raise their hands if you believe that all your employees show up every day to be safe and productive and make a quality product. The sad thing is that when I ask this question, very few hands go up. Most people believe that the workers are in it for the money, but that's not true. Every single worker that shows up on your job site is a living, breathing human being. They have goals and desires and dreams. They have families. There's accomplishments that they want to have in life. Money is the source for them to be able to build a better life, but they're not just in it for the money. People are proud of what they do and they want to do good work. Unfortunately, most leaders just think that they're in it for the money, and the only way I can get them to do something is to incentivize them. But nothing could be further from the truth. Look, people really do want to do a good job. It's just us as leaders have to define what a good job is. Have we explained it to them? Do they understand what the quality product is that we're looking for? Do they understand how to put it in, how to put the work in safely? Most studies will show you that if people understand the quality and understand the process to do it safely, productivity will improve. Unfortunately, the way we measure productivity sometimes doesn't always give us that result. Lee Ellis, a leadership guru that I follow, makes this statement: the truth is, most people want to be successful, and they'll work hard to get there. Good leaders recognize this, collaborate with them, knowing that their people succeed, they will as well. As leaders, it is our job to help people to understand what is the quality output. Because if you don't do it right the first time, you got to do it again. It was John Wooden, a basketball coach here in the United States, that said, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? Good quality work improves productivity, and good safe work, right, produces good quality. So I'm going to assume that most of you are familiar with the 8 wastes. If you understand Womack, and I always go back to Leiker's book on the Toyota way, he describes the 7 wastes of Toyota. Now there's 8 of them on my board here, but you go back to Leiker and you go back to the roots of Toyota and Lean, and what you discover is that they had 7 wastes. The first one and most obvious there on the left is defects. we know what defects are. It's work that hasn't been put in right. But one of the things I challenge people with is what truly is a defect, right? Most people think that, defects are just, well, we didn't put it in right, or we made a mistake or an error. But I raised the bar for defects. I'm going to bet that if I were to ask, most of you would say that you excel at customer service, right? And most proud companies work really hard to impress their customer, the final customer, right? The owner. But I've seen a lot of work that goes in where the owner isn't always that satisfied. And in my current role at MSOE, I'm not only the professor, but I'm also the owner's representative on our construction projects. And so I know what the contractor is going through. I did that for 40 years. And now I'm on the other side expecting, good service. And here I am at the end of a major project, and the owner, the architect and contractor are trying to sell me something that they know doesn't meet the level of quality we expected. So I redefine the word defect as this: unmet owner expectations. In other words, if you have a punch list at the end of the job, that's a list of all your defects. Those are all the things you did that did not satisfy the owner. Now think about that for a minute. If you label defects as unmet owner expectations, then you should never have a punch list. So why do we have punch lists? Well, we're following the plans and specs, but we aren't listening to our owners. Or we don't follow the plans and specs and we put something in wrong, then we try to get the owner to sell it. So change the way you think about things, change what you believe. It'll change the results that you get. Now, the other three on the left-hand side, the ones in purple: overproduction, overprocessing, and excess inventory. These are the process wastes, right? Overproduction sometimes is, I define that as working out of sequence in your schedule. Somebody's going too far and then causing roadblocks for others. Or we overprocess. We do things more than we need to, or we aren't doing enough things that we need to. And excess inventory can be an issue, although today, right, with supply chain issues, we want more. We want to make sure the inventory is there. So it's something that we have to balance. Now, on the right-hand side, the ones in blue: unnecessary transportation, unnecessary motion, and waiting. I call these the motion wastes, right? Are we moving equipment more than we need to? Are we moving materials from one side to the other side and then back again? Or where are we storing them? Too much transportation, too much motion with the equipment. And the opposite of that is when we're waiting for something. And these three, I think, get the most focus of any in construction. We've been focusing on, I know I have, for over 40 years. We're always looking at ways to reduce the amount of motion and reduce the amount of waiting. We think that that's improving productivity. And it does, but it hasn't been all that effective. Now, what's interesting is if you go to Liker's book on page 35, he says that these are the 7 Toyota wastes, and then he added one more for the way that business is run, and he called it unused employee creativity. And when I read that the very first time, I was curious, why did he add one more? And then he explains that the way a lot of companies operate is that the culture does not embrace the craft worker, the frontline worker. In other words, leaders look at the other 7 wastes: defects, overproduction, overprocessing, excess inventory, waiting, unnecessary motion, and unnecessary transportation. The leaders are always looking at ways to minimize that and then telling the craft worker how to perform. In Toyota, in the Toyota way, the employee is engaged in minimizing all of the other 7 wastes. And so this is where Liker, and I'll tell you Womack, and all the way back to Deming start talking about respect for people, bringing people into the equation, bringing your craft workers and tapping into their knowledge to see how do we get this to work out better. So when you understand the wastes and understand how process works, I always ask this question: well, who's the customer? And most people think that the customer is the end user. Who am I building this for? And ultimately it is. But when you're going to start looking at wastes, you have to understand that the customer is defined by Deming is the next person in the process. In other words, you have to satisfy the people within your process on your construction site. So let me give you an example. If you're putting in a concrete foundation and you have anchor bolts in that foundation, who is the customer? Well, the customer is the iron worker who has to put the column on top of those anchor bolts. And so as you're setting those anchor bolts into that concrete footing, you need to talk to the iron worker. How do you want them? Where do you want them set? How much stud do you need, etc. If we start thinking about the customer being the next person in the process, we'll have dialogue that helps make sure that we put it in right the first time so the next person takes it into place. But the other thing that dawned on me when I looked at this was, where's safety? When I've talked to many people about this and said, where does safety fit in? Well, they say, well, safety is really kind of a defect. It's something you didn't do right in your process. And I said, if we're going to really talk about safety as a paramount part of our work, if we're going to put safety first, why don't we elevate safety to the same level as the other wastes? So I took it upon myself, if Leichter could add an eighth waste, well, then I would go ahead and add a ninth waste. And I called them accidents. Because when accidents happen, right, the damage equipment, or worse, injure our precious resource of workers, we need to look at the process to figure out what caused that accident to occur, and then fix that process. Give it the same attention that we give the other 8 wastes. Because when things go wrong, right, if we see people waiting around, we're going to take action to figure out why are they waiting, and let's get that fixed. Well, let's do the same thing with safety. When somebody gets hurt, let's take a deep dive into what caused the accident and make sure that we understand how to prevent that from happening again and improve our process along the way. And a key to this is bringing in the creativity of our people, which means we're including the people who were injured in the incident. So let me introduce lean safety to you. As I mentioned right off the bat, lean safety is culture. It's not tools. Tools help you to define and find the root cause, but it's really about a culture. It goes back to the 2 basic tenets of lean: continuous improvement and respect for people. Now, the continuous improvement part is that we focus on increasing the value for the customer, meaning everybody within the process, and we develop our employees to resolve process problems. In other words, we give our employees license to start thinking about how to do things better. Instead of just strict policies, do this, don't do that, we start giving them guiding principles in which they can be creative and come up with better answers. So that in and of itself is a respect for people. We look at lean safety as a mindset. Leaders need to understand the mindset. There's a great book out there by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And I'll talk about that, where mindset comes from in a couple of slides from now. But the key here is that how you think as a leader, how you think and behave as a leader makes a huge difference in your safety program. It's a mindset that says we're not going to have accidents. It's a mindset that's based on this world-class safety organization. How do you become world-class? When I ask this question, I usually get some interesting answers, right? No accidents, or the best safety records. Well, what does world-class organization mean? This is the definition I use from Donald Rumsfeld. World-class organizations do not tolerate preventable accidents. In other words, there's 0 tolerance, right? Just like we don't want to have any waste in our processes, we don't want to have any accidents in our organizations. And so we need to make sure everything that can be prevented is prevented, and we don't tolerate it. We work diligently to make those accidents go away. So here's one of my favorite pictures. Just crashed your Ferrari into a light pole. We call this an accident. And if I ask, do you think this is a problem? Most people say yes. And that's okay, because that's the way that we are taught and trained, is to think that, oh, we see this accident, oh, that's a problem. But I want to challenge the way that you look at that today. Because I say this isn't a problem. This is a result of a much deeper problem. Inattentive driving or some other thing. And even if it's inattentive driving, that was the result of something else. Getting down to the true root cause takes a lot of effort. So if we start looking at what we see in front of us and not consider that the problem, but consider it the result, now we need to go figure out what is the root cause. So when we look at accidents, right, it's undesirable. It's something that happened that resulted in harm, injury, damage, or loss. And we can see what that accident is, right? We can see the actual results. They're right there in front of us, right? Somebody cut an arm, or broke a bone, or broke a tool. We can see the results in front of us. But the issue is that where do we want to be? Now, we don't say that, well, he broke a bone and the result is I didn't want a broken bone. No, the result was a broken bone. What was the desired result was for the process to manage properly so the person did not break their bone. We don't focus on the incident, we focus on the process. The problem in and of itself, right, is not the result. The problem lies in between what happened and what we wanted to happen. The problem lies, the process that I have produced an undesirable result. So what do I need to fix in my process to make sure that this doesn't happen again? That real problem lies in that gap. So this is a formula that I want to show you for reflecting on the process. In other words, how do we reflect back to start to seek where the root cause? What is interesting for me is that in all the things that I have studied, I have seen this this model in several different places. The words might be a little bit different, but this model, when it comes to thinking and comes to mindset and comes to behavior, is very common. Results happen from behavior. In other words, the result is here. There's something that I did that created the result that I received. There's something, anytime that there's a result that you experience, there was some sort of behavior that went into this. From there, we start going, well, what was I thinking when I chose that behavior? What was going on in my head that allowed me to behave this certain way that got to that result? Now, most organizations, this is where they stop, right? They believe it's behavior-based safety programs. And when somebody does something wrong, we just tell them, don't do that again. Change your thinking, change what you're doing. But I'll bet that all of you have had a habit that you've tried to break. And it takes a tremendous amount of energy and effort to break a bad habit. And so just telling somebody not to do that again, right, or understand the rules or follow our policy, well, that's not working. We know it's not working, right? It might work temporarily. So what is it about the thinking that drives this behavior, that drives the results? And from there, you have to go back down into the core, your individual core or your company's core. What is your company culture? Because your culture resides at this level. The beliefs, the assumptions, the theories, the stories that you tell yourself. The beliefs that you have, these have come from experience. They come from experiments, things that you've learned throughout your life. This is what you believe. It could be also your culture. It could also be family culture, etc. What do you believe? Because what you believe will drive what you think. The second is the assumptions. Our brains are incredible tools that take in a tremendous amount of information. The point is that we can only process about less than 1/10 of the information that we get bombarded with constantly. So our brain makes assumptions to put all of these thoughts into the right category, the right process. So many times we see what we want to believe because it just makes sense for us, and it's easier for our brain to manage that way. The other thing are the theories. What theories do I employ? What things do I want to believe based on things I've done in the past? And last, stories. What stories do I tell myself? I mean, think about it. Our brain, again, when it makes assumptions, will then make a story and we'll tell ourselves the story, and that story becomes our truth, even though it may be far from the truth. There's a lot of study in this level about bias, right? What do I see? What do I believe? But the point is that to change at this level, the beliefs, the assumptions, the theory, the story level, this basic level, the change at this level is difficult. It hurts. If you're trying to change or you're trying to do something, it's difficult. And this is why habits are so hard to break. This is the culture that you want to be establishing. What is the company going to believe? What is the company going to assume? When you look at this box and this box, the thinking box with the belief box, this is the mindset. This is what you have to control in your mind as you start to look at behaviors and results. So let me give you an example, because when this happens, right, when the result happens that you didn't desire, you have to start thinking backward all the way down to reflect at this very basic level. So let me give you an example. An employee falls from a stepladder. They were standing on a stepladder. They fell off the stepladder. That's the result. Somebody fell from a stepladder. It happens. So what was the behavior that caused that? Well, the employee was standing on top of a stepladder and reaches for something, causing the ladder to collapse, and the employee falls and is injured. Now, I can tell you that when I go and talk to construction professionals, and I do it all the time, and I'll be addressing a bunch of foremen tomorrow for AGC, I'll ask them this question, right? What's it say on top of a stepladder? Every single construction employee knows that the top of a stepladder is not a step. We go through it in our safety meetings, and yet people still stand on top of stepladders. I see it. I tell this story when I was at Vogel Brothers and we were introducing this program, that I would give this safety talk to every brand new employee. I would try to explain to them our culture of thinking and our culture of beliefs with safety. And that meant every employee. And at one time I was giving the presentation to our brand new receptionist. She was 27 years old. And prior to working for us, she was a barista at Starbucks. And I asked her, what does it say on top of a stepladder? And you know what she told me? She said, this is not a step. I said, could you believe it? A 27-year-old barista who's never been on a construction site knows that you don't step on top of a stepladder. Then why in the world do our construction professionals stand on top of stepladders and get injured? Well, because it has to come from that next level of thinking. Many times what we see this, right, we get in an accident, we write it down. They didn't follow the safety policy, right? And we blame that person for the accident. But let's take another look. What was that person thinking? And this is hard. This is challenging because many times they won't tell you because they're afraid that you're going to punish them. This is the difference between fault finding and fact finding. What we want to do is understand the facts. What was the person actually thinking? And so one of the things might be is that they only needed one more thing done, right? And I was just going to reach out there and get it, because the right ladder was all the way back at the trailer. It was too long to go get it. And I wanted to improve the productivity, so I didn't have time to go get the other ladder. Or maybe even last time I went back to get the right ladder, I got yelled at because I wasn't doing my job right. I was wasting time. There was something that the employee was thinking, and usually that employee is making a decision about productivity every single time. Now, we can tell them, don't think that way, just go get the right ladder. But why do they think that way? Why does our employee think that productivity is more important? We tell them all the time, safety first. And we have to get down to that next level with that employee. We have to get down to what does this employee believe? What is going through their head? What theory are they going by? And this is it. I've stood on top of that stepladder before and I didn't get hurt. In other words, I've done it in the past. I can do it again. the Russian roulette approach to safety, right? Just keep doing it until at one point it's going to happen to you. The second thing might be this. Well, that warning on the top step is for clumsy people. I'm a construction professional. I'm not clumsy. I'm expected to get the job done. You pay me to get this work in place. And so I can make the decision about taking a safety shortcut. I'll bet you more than often that person has stood on top of that step ladder and they did it at home and they were safe at it. And now they've brought that belief, they've brought that mindset to your job site. So how do we go about fixing that? Because what we think of a lot of times is that, hey, we want our employees to go home the same way they showed up in the morning, right? We want them to be safe going home at the end of the day. And I'd say that's really not the right way to be thinking about it. Because do you want them to show up the next day the way they went home? In other words, when you're teaching people to be safe, you need to do it because you care about them. You need to do it because you want them to be safe all the time. If you say that I want my employees to go home the way they showed up, what you're really saying is I only care about your safety during working hours. And that needs to change. Your company culture has to now think, I want my people to be safe all the time, at home and at work. I have to teach home safety as well. So what do you believe? Here's that first question again. Do you believe everybody shows up to be productive and safe? Because if you don't, the way that you react to them, the way that you think about them, and the way that you behave toward them won't get you the results you want. If you think that your employees are just there for the paycheck, then all of your thinking and all of your decisions are going to be based around financial incentives. And your employees know that. But if you believe that you honestly care about your employees, that I want my employees to be safe and do a quality job, now I'm going to start thinking about them differently. Do you believe that people are the key to your company's success? I mean, think about this. Think of what's outside of the current issue we have with supply chain. What's the biggest problem we have in construction? There aren't enough craft workers. We don't have enough workers. We've got this gap. We need more workers. And most people just look at the workers and say, well, we're just hiring for their backs, not their brains. The point is that people are the key to your success. These frontline workers put the work in place. Your company doesn't exist without them. They are, key resources. And I use the term, they're scarce resources now. And in COVID world, and here in the United States, we started calling them essential workers. It's changed the mindset if you start thinking of people as essential versus just there to put work in place. People, all your people, are the key to your company's success. Now here's the big one, because this goes back to Rumsfeld's quote, right? You don't tolerate preventable accidents. In order to do that, you have to believe that every accident that happens on your job site is preventable. And believe me, they are. I was teaching this to a young safety manager, and he would quiz me every week. He'd come up with another thing about, well, what about this? And I'd come up with a way to say it's preventable. And each week he would try to come up with some bizarre thing. And I would just respond in a way that would look at it from a different perspective and say preventable. And he came up to me one day. This is probably a problem you don't have often, but it was in Wisconsin, and our tower crane had ice formed on it. We had a foggy night, and then the temperature dropped down to below freezing. And so what happened, that humidity was on the tower crane, and then it turned to ice. And when we turned the tower crane, this ice would fall off, and it was dangerous to hit people. And he came to me, he says, how in the world do you prevent ice from getting on the tower crane? And I said, well, ice on the tower crane is not the problem. That's the result. I said, what's happening is that there's ice falling off the tower crane that causes an unsafe situation. So therefore, don't run the tower crane. He said, are you kidding me? He says, how do we get any work done? I said, wait a minute. Are we talking about safety? Or are we talking about productivity? If you want to prevent the ice from falling on people's heads, then don't run the tower crane. You got to come up with another way to look at it. And it was at that point that this young safety manager looked at me and goes, I now get it. I now understand what you're saying. I now understand the difference between productivity and safety. Believe me, most people would say, well, we got to figure out some way to handle this ice so we can run the tower crane. The answer is don't run the tower crane. It's unsafe. So you need to believe that all accidents are preventable. And then I want to bring this point up to you. The language that we use, the words that we use have a tremendous impact on the way that our brain thinks about issues. Let me use the term demolition. When you hear demolition or demo, what do you think of, right? Kind of reckless, wrecking balls. You think of dust, you think of noise, you think of destruction going on. But if I use the word deconstruction, what do you think? Deconstruction, that's the orderly taking things apart, making things, planned and how it's going to be disassembled and removed. Just using the term deconstruction versus demolition will change the way that your people think about the word and think about the action. One of my other ones that we did at Vogel Brothers was this, is that the most dangerous tool that we have, the most dangerous power tool we have in our toolbox is the grinder. Well, if your brain thinks of grinding, right, that's just two things rubbing against each other and you might get an abrasion. People are not getting hurt when we have grinding cups in the grinders. People get hurt when we put cutting blades in the grinder. They're no longer grinders now, they're cutters. And we started calling them cutters. In other words, in order to put a cutting blade into a grinder, they actually had a series of steps we had to go through to make sure it was the right tool and we understood how it was going to happen. And accidents with cutters were eliminated instantly at Vogel. For the year before we had 6, the next year we had none because we looked at them as cutters, not grinders. So one of the lean tools that we have out there is called 5Y. 5Y is an opportunity for us to get to root cause so we can learn. Look, anytime there's an incident, a near miss, an accident, these are opportunities for us to learn. We have to look at what can we learn from this. So the first piece is, right, the root cause analysis. Asking why more than once. Asking why in a way that is safe, not about blame, but asking why. What happened in our process? Because behavior cannot be a root cause. Behavior cannot be a root cause. Most organizations I see settle on behavior over 90% of the time. They believe that behavior, somebody's action, the way somebody did something, caused the accident, and we blame that person. To have a lean safety program, we have to be focused on the process that created the result of the injury or the accident. It's fact finding, not fault finding. We have to go through the process. So the key question you have to ask is what happened in our process that caused this accident to occur? It's a much different way of thinking. Let me give you an example. When we were at Vogel, we had a superintendent and a forklift operator that were charged with moving a Connex box. We had to move a storage box across the back of our yard. When they looked at it, they should have had a crane, but they waited too long and they couldn't use a crane. And so the forklift operator said, yeah, I got enough capacity, I can drag it along. As he started to drag it, the rear left tire fell into a rut and the unit rolled over on the left-hand side. As it was starting to roll, the operator jumped out to safety. Everything was good. The unit, nobody was hurt. The unit had about $4,000 worth of damage. And we sat down to have a root cause analysis. The first thing we asked is, when did you know about having to move this? The answer was, well, we had a week in advance. And the superintendent said it was my fault. I did not look at the problem sooner. I should have had a crane. And by the time we looked at it on Thursday, we didn't have time to get a crane. So we asked, well, then why didn't you look at it sooner? He said, I didn't make it a priority. And I said, okay, so what are we going to do next time? And he said, what I want to do next time is to make sure that I've got my, that I understand the complexity of this issue. I said, okay, that's fine. But let's now talk about the SkyTrack. We asked a question that was pretty obvious. Why did the operator jump from the SkyTrack? And I'll tell you at this time that the operator who was in the meeting was terrified. It's a young man. He was terrified. Either he was going to lose his job or something was going to happen. And this is the way that most people are when they're involved in an accident, because we're always trying to blame them. And we asked, why did you jump? He says, well, I didn't want to get hurt when it rolled over. And then we asked a real simple question. Do you know where the safest place to be when a piece of equipment rolls over? And he didn't know the answer. And we said, so you're aware the safest place to be is in the piece of equipment. That's why we require seatbelts. So no doubt you weren't wearing your seatbelt. And he said no. And here he thought he was going to get chastised again. And so my safety guy asked a question. He said, I've looked at your application and you said that you were a qualified forklift owner or operator. Why did you state that? Again, rather scared, he said, well, I needed this job, and my friends told me that forklift operators get better chances at working. So I felt that if I put that down as a forklift, I've run it a few times, but I'm not really all that qualified, but I put it down because I've run it and I figured I'd get a better chance of getting the job. So my safety guy then said, well, we put an unqualified person in the forklift because we believed you. So that's our fault. The fact that we believed what you wrote down without verifying it was an error on our part. So what do we need to do in our process to make sure that we don't ever put an unqualified operator in a forklift before? This was interesting because now the forklift operator who was in the meeting says, no, it was my fault. It was my fault. And we said, no, it wasn't. It was our fault. We put an unqualified person in that forklift. And so what we decided to do at that point, when anybody clicks that they're a forklift operator, we have a 2-hour circuit that they have to go run in our backyard to verify to us that they are qualified. And once we realize, and if they're not qualified, we actually will send them to school to become qualified if that's what they desire. Most organizations would have stopped at the fact that the guy did not know how to run a forklift, and they just would have said, either you're gone or you're not running the forklift anymore, and that would be it. And what would happen is that the next person coming in who writes that they're qualified gets stuff in a forklift, and maybe they get killed. You can see now the difference about fact finding versus fault finding. Most often we stop at the fault of the person involved in the accident instead of really looking down into the process that put that person in the unsafe position. In order to have a good safety culture, you have to be fact finding and not fault finding. Where does it start? It starts with trust. Look, you have to engage your employees in trust. You have to get them to be able to speak to you in trust. But in order to get trust, you have to give trust first. It doesn't come because you tell them, hey, trust me. It comes when you demonstrate trust to them. The second thing, you have to see your employees as people. They're real, breathing, living individuals with goals, desires, families, wants, needs, right? Got to find out what they are. Your employees are people. They're not just a means for getting work done. You have to change your focus from employees as a cost, right? They're costing us or they're not being productive, to we have to engage these people as a resource. And as I mentioned, they are now a scarce resource. We need our people. We can't just be throwing them out. We need our people. And the last one, as managers and leaders, you have to be engaged and committed, not just participate. And too often I see leaders that say, yep, this is my safety program. You guys go get this done, but they don't believe it. They don't understand it. They don't even believe that all accidents are preventable. And that is a problem. You have to be engaged and committed. So Here's how I define that. To understand the difference between committed and participating. This morning, I had bacon and eggs for breakfast. The hen participated and the pig committed to my breakfast. Now, I'm not saying you're putting your life on the line for your safety program, but that's the level of commitment that I'm talking about. You just don't participate. You don't make this somebody else's responsibility. You need to take this to heart as a leader yourself. So let me recap the safety culture that I'm talking about here. Number one, right? We're all about people. It's respect for people and working with people. Number one, never take safety risks. Just don't do it. You have to be able to tell your employees if it's unsafe, stop. And then we're going to look at it again. If it's not going according to plan, stop. Don't ever take a safety risk. You put quality and safety and productivity in your daily plan. You plan for quality. What is the desired result? How are we going to get that desired result done safely? And how can we make it so we can do it with the minimal amount of effort and everything will work out better? And you get it right the first time. But never put productivity or a customer's need ahead of working safe. If somebody tells you to do something that's not safe, no. Stop and think before you take non-standard actions. If there's something that's out of the ordinary, it's not something that we normally do, we need to create a plan, and then we have to watch that plan to make sure that it's getting done right. And anytime there's any deviation of plan, we stop to make sure we're still safe. On the other side of that coin is complacencies. When we're doing things over and over again, let's not be complacent. If we're doing routine tasks, let's constantly be thinking about, is there a way to improve it? Is there something I can do different? How do I maintain the safe program that I have going here? As I mentioned before, the words that you use are important. Be very thoughtful about the words that you use. And as I like to say, safety, lean safety, it's a way of life. It's the way I live 24/7. I care about my employees when they're at home, and I care about them when they're at work. I tell people around here, I said, I'd be just fine if one of your safety programs talked about how to hook up your gas grill or how to do something safe around the house. Well, look, the job site safety meetings don't just have to be about job site. They can be about anything, right? So as I finish here, I want to give you two tools to start working with right away. They're tools, if you're familiar with Lean, are going to jump out at you. The first one is that I want to talk about is the Lean toolbox is the Deming cycle. Plan, do, check, act. So in the morning, you put together your plan of what you're going to get done, and you measure, right? How am I going to get there? And you put in there, here's all the safety equipment I need. What I like to ask or challenge our superintendents to do is say, let the workers tell you, here's what we got to get done today. Let the workers tell you what tools that they need, what safety equipment they need, and how they're going to go about doing it. Get the frontline workers involved in the planning, and then implement the plan. And as that plan is going, constantly check at it and look for deviation. If it's not going the right way or it's not going to plan, stop and check it again. And if you need to, adjust and make a new plan. But just employing PDCA, getting the PDCA thinking into everybody's mind is going to get you better results. The other thing is the A3. If you're familiar with the A3, this is a great way to start doing your root cause analysis and your safety program. I'd much rather see this than a checkbox. And I see a lot of safety, analysis where they just run through a little checkbox of everything. And I'd say I'd much rather have a discussion like this. What happened, right? What was the current state? What happened? And let's figure out, well, why didn't it turn out the way we wanted it to? And start looking at our process. Start defining the process. Draw a picture of your process and try to figure out what happened within that process that caused the problem. And then discuss, well, what are we going to do next time? How can we plan to do it differently? And then let's put that into action and then monitoring, bringing PDCA back into the A3. So those are two tools. If you're using them, start applying them to your safety program, because here's the key, right? People don't care how much you know about safety until they know how much you care about them being safe. You want to be that leader that cares about your people being safe 24/7.